post because for
There you
exactly things like this. So anyway, so here we are. It's the 22nd of September, year 2021, and I'm Steve Hodgdon. This is Modern Asset Management's semi-monthly discussion about what's going on in our world. Oftentimes it's about whatever mistake or struggle I'm having this month. This month, we're going to talk about a 30 unit group of contracts for deed that have a very, very good cash flow. And it's worth comparing to what you're doing to seeing how you stack up. I was starting to talk about where I've learned the most. Most of what I've learned is through mistakes. Hang on, I got somebody poking me. Darn it. Hang on. All right. Okay, hang on. I gotta let somebody in. I'm gonna pause.
the protections that, if we set aside the protections that, some of the rules say that should be in place, and we assume that everybody could operate, whether you're primary or business purpose. If we assume that everybody can operate in a sense of I can make my own decisions, then you'd like to assume that people are getting into some sort of risk situation that they are capable of assessing, albeit that may not necessarily be true because some people bite off more than they understand, right? I picked up 123 Main Street, and all I thought I needed to do was fix the plumbing, and I didn't realize there was going to be such an electrical problem, or I didn't know to go do a sewer scope and figure out if that was going to be, a $10,000 replacement.
Let me interrupt a little bit right here. Yeah. Try to bring this to a tighten you up some, as we always need to do with each other. Yes. This is a pool of assets in Gary, Indiana, that are all older homes in a neighborhood that has neighborhoods that have seen great reductions in home value over time. These are a group of that world that have been stabilized for a number of years. There's a payment history that takes that risk off the table. The other risk that we have when you buy aged inventory is that you don't know whether it's been maintained, and you have to assume it hasn't. I've got one property that every time I turn over the tenant, there's another $5,000 that has to be put in to fix the plumbing or install an air conditioner or put a roof on. And that's just the nature of buying a house that was built in the 1950s. This is that. And what Dion, from having all the pieces that you need, you get the idea, you get the hands-on, in-person, real inspection at a professional level, which may or may not have been done by the investor who's paying this mortgage now. So it's often someone who has put a house back together, gotten it on the Section 8 list, has a Section 8 tenant in it, and we don't know what the condition of the house is on the inside. And we buy those, typically you buy those things in our world blind. And and it's one of the things on my list is, did you see the house? And there have been several times that I bought houses that I hadn't seen them. So in this instance, if you've got somebody who's there, who understands that world, that's a better look than me flying out from California, looking at it and going, yeah, I think it's got 10 years before it needs a roof, because I don't know. So that's the piece of being able to, you're going to manage it like it's your own, right? So.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Steve. I mean, so, and same, right? So, I've spent most of my career desk jockeying management for these types of assets with our property management firm. We are boots on the ground, and we have personnel that, directly reports to me that they can go and look at stuff. And quite frankly, I go to a lot of these as we do our due diligence, because in some situations you have an insufficient credit file, which is very often the case. And oftentimes when you look at pricing for, a seller finance deal, whether it be a contract for deed or a mortgage or deed of trust, the reason a lot of people just kind of like pull a discount out of their back pocket and say, yeah, well, it must be that. But realistically, the discount is warranted because the originator of that transaction does not have the scrutiny or the underwriting power of an institution or originator. They just don't, right? They're not adhering to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or whatever kind of underwriting, criteria.
Right.
And, oftentimes in seller finance situations, much like this portfolio, I'll be honest with you, that we have little to none of a credit file. And that is problematic, right? That can be problematic, and that should warrant a discount. But then what is the level of discount that warrants starts to become the question. And what are we discounting for? What are we protecting ourselves from? I think
let's back off from that. That's getting a little technical.
Okay.
Can I jump the slide?
Yep.
Okay. So here we talk about turnkey, fix and flip. And so for the folks that are on the phone that are on the call who rehab property and putting it out on the market, and that's me, and that's several other people. There's several big national companies. Was it Memphis Invests that sell turnkey? They buy wholesale, put a tenant in it, mark it up, make some money, and that makes those transactions skinny, like you said, in case something goes wrong. And so the idea here of a customized portfolio for an investor budget, that means creating a budget and holding some of the rent money back, knowing that there's going to be repairs needed when properties turn over. Right. You were talking about the lack of underwriting on the borrower. I think that's mitigated here because it's not just 6 months of payments or 3 months in possession of rent. These tenants, some of these tenants have been in for 5+ years now, and they've now started to build more equity by paying down their loans. Like you said, it was $15,000 average balance against that home value of $50,000. So there's $35,000 in equity there that people aren't going to want to walk away from. But seller finance, we're just coming out of a no foreclosure, no eviction world. The rules have changed, and they're going to change even more. People who are living in the house have more rights than you as the note holder today. That's just the way it is. And that doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It just means that's the way it is. Okay, so all right, back to you, so we can pull this back and start talking about the deal package.
Yeah, so we're here to build investor relations. We obviously piggyback some of the expertise that I've garnered over the last 20 years in the industry. And a lot of it is set up to identify the loose ends in any particular deal, and every deal is a snowflake, right? Stephen, you and I have always talked about that. No two deals are the same. And some of anything, whether it's this portfolio or another portfolio that look like, some of it's going to have its own nuances, whether it's insufficient credit files or a problem with the property, et cetera, et cetera. So what we set out to do with the stuff that we have that we can potentially manage is to get out and say, hey, look, we can get out. We've got some systems that we have in place. We have some relationships to create some capital mitigation for the investor. And on top of that, we, in a contract for deed, since we are a real estate company, we own a real estate property management company, we can be a hybrid sort of mortgage servicer on steroids. I can't do this for a mortgage. I can do this for a contract for deed because you are the property owner and the purchaser in contract is still technically a tenant. So with that power, we have the opportunity to go inspect, demand, and create situations for those particular purchasers where they do have to report for us. Where I think oftentimes in some of these contract for deeds where you get, especially in a situation where like an investor bought some stuff from tax sale and they just want to flip it out real quick, right? You get a situation where, Billy Borrower shows up and they're like, hey, I just want to buy the property and I'm gonna live in it. I'm gonna do my own repairs. And everything that you could potentially think of that would happen in that situation does. Can you go to the case study from this portfolio? So we had one, actually, Steve and I, yeah, you're going the wrong way. Steve and I had a client come forward. It's one, oh man, where's the case study? Oh, you don't have it. Okay. All right. Well, you're missing it. That's interesting. So I'll tell you about the case study. So there's one asset. So it was 31 assets. Now it's 30. How about that? So there was an asset in this portfolio that just got picked up. And we conducted due diligence. We're getting ready to close. It was a multi-unit and it was a 3-flat. The purchaser, I'm going to call him borrower again. The borrower is a primary occupant. And so the intention of that borrower was to purchase the property, live in it, and mom and dad are going to live upstairs and brother's going to live downstairs and primary borrower is going to live on the main floor. Great. Sounds cool, right? So from a glance and from the data, from a tape standpoint, that looks like it looks good, right? We had an AVM come in at 65,000. We had a BPO come back at 205,000. And when we did our inspection, the basement is under construction and so is the top floor. And so 2/3 of the property is uninhabitable. And while we're going through our inspection, we're talking to the borrower in terms of what improvements that they plan to put in place. And it turns out that it's a lot, I like to say it's a lot like what you expect, but I don't know what you guys would expect. But, it's, hey, I've got a friend or a cousin or a brother that's going to do the electric or the plumbing or whatever. So I'm going to give them a couple grand. They're going to do this. And as my crew and I walk through, we're saying, hey, look, did you pull a permit for this work? The answer was no. This isn't to code. You got to correct this. And so I reflect on that and saying, how many of those situations occur where you don't have that taking place and you've got a borrower or a vendee in place that is saying, I'm just going to do this. And you're in a municipality where it might be easy for a moment to kind of put a masquerade on that, but sooner or later, code enforcement is going to catch up to you. And so what that ended up, the conversation ended up leading us to was the borrower, we said, we're not here to take your property. We're here to help you. We're here to protect the investor and we're here to protect your investment. But at the same point in time, you got to stop hiring your cousin. And, you need a real electrician. That real electrician needs to pull a permit. There needs to be a plan. And you need to have a schedule of the way that you improve this property. Because, this particular borrower was, throwing $5,000 over here on one side of the property and $5,000 over there on one side of the property. And it wasn't clean. And at the same point in time, some of the property was occupied. So we stepped in to manage all of that, take back control, and that all has to flow back through us. This is, I'd like to say that this is one of the best ways, I think, that anybody could manage a contract for deed, because oftentimes contract for deeds do end up in this situation where the vendee, the buyer of the purchaser in contract, is free to do whatever they want, which could potentially alienate the investor if a default occurs. Like, you don't want Billy Borrower just making random repairs and all of a sudden they default and you've got a bunch of work that's out of code. You want work that is managed and being done properly, and you want them to be a successful borrower. And so we take that, we put that in place. The other layer of protection that we put in for the investors was the home warranty system, which picks up on the investor behalf things that are unforeseen. So for instance, if the sewer line collapsed and nobody knew that because nobody did a sewer scope, the warranty would pick that up. For $400 a year, it's a pretty good protection. So we try to mitigate that. The ROI that we show you here and the discount is based on all of that work. And I think it ends up being a pretty safe investment for an investor. And at the same point in time, our firm picks up what you could probably call some of the heavy lifting, right? But we're here to do that. And the nice thing for that, and I'll be honest with you, we're a property management firm. We charge 10% on cash flow, and we charge 10% on, improvement or, time and material. But if it's a contract for deed, the purchaser of contract is the one that would be responsible for our 10% time and material. This particular purchaser was more than happy for us to show up. And she's actually already engaged us to help her get plumbers, electricians, proper permitting. She just came to the understanding that, wow, my cousin Vinny can't do the electric work here. Like, this is about to be outside of code and I could get in trouble, and I don't want that. I want a home that my family can live in.
Okay. All right. So let's move from this, since we're running over time. And
as always,
I want to take this from another whack, and let's look at the numbers. So I've got a small portfolio of properties in Pensacola in various stages of rent, CFD, mortgage, all that kind of thing. So
sure.
If I'm going to bundle those together, like you've bundled them here, you're presenting this idea that you have to have a cohesive solution for all the things that all the known issues that may come up. So that's, and the home warranty is a great idea. I don't know how many, just having one property cost you $5,000, pays for a whole bunch of them. So I took some numbers here. Is the average term remaining 10 years?
No,
because
we have a vintage of 2016 to 2020.
Okay.
So
a ballpark, how many years left? Or
I think the average remaining term probably called 7 years, probably 6 and change.
Okay, so 6 and change, 72, 75 months, to use a number?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
I'm going to plug 75. Hang on, I'm going to stop this share for a second. And
you want me to pull up my numbers?
Yeah, you can go pull up your numbers. I'm going to do another screen share. You can see a calculator?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is on my list of things I learned how to use. Half a dozen years ago, I learned how to use only 5 buttons of a financial calculator. If I had learned how to do this 35 years ago when I started working for myself, I can't imagine how much money I would have saved myself or learned how to do. So I'm going to plug in some numbers here. So we have maybe just to have numbers to talk about. We have 75 months. You said the interest rate was 9. And so for those of us that are doing single builds and grabbing this house and that house and trying to slam things together, this, if you don't have this, it's $5.99 in the Apple store. These calculators, my first one I bought of these was $100. So I took, so what do we have? So that's my interest rate. And you said we had 15,865, just to have a number, times 30 assets. So I've got 400, something like $475,000. So that gives me a gross cash flow of $8,300. Part of this is because the notes are maturing, more principal is being paid down faster. So your interest capture is less, right? So you have to, be cognizant of the acceleration of these accounts. So if we applied, you said maybe this trades for 85 cents.
Yep.
Right. That's the street offer that we're talking about. Oops. I lost that. So you'd be buying this cash flow for about $75,000.
You're close. Look at you. You know what? You know what? Good for you with your manual math.
Yeah.
So
Right? Well,
if you take the portfolio on with 31 assets, you're talking about a relative cash flow around $410,000. You'd have a principal and interest payment on annual income gross for about $94,248.
mm-hmm.
You'd net out management fee of 10%. There's a warranty because that warranty renews. It's not good math because with the proper property inspection we do, you get an 18 months, but let's just say it's 12 months, so it's $13,460 a year. Investor cash would be $71,363. That gives you a cash on cash return of 17.53%. Okay. So there's that's easy math. That's easy breezy math because there's variables in that. The reason for the discount comes back from some of this. In the state of Indiana, you need to do a quiet title if title is not held for 7 years. So with 10-year instruments, as long as there's no paid in full, you're going to qualify to be able to convey warrantable title on all those assets. We already factored in $1,200 for quiet title on every asset. Would you have to quiet every title? No. Is there a little bit of a discount for the home warranties because you got an extra 6 months? Yes. So if you were to do it at raw, you'd get a 15.91%. And with the abbreviated math, you're getting the 17.5. So, I call it something between 15 and 17% plus or minus.
Okay. So I'm going to try to poke a hole in that.
Okay.
So, like I said, I'm trying to, what I try to do is, in my simple world is, can I figure out what I'm doing without going to a 5-page Excel spreadsheet? If by the time we're going to buy something, we've done all of that work, but the trying to get a sense of what this does, right? So you said there's a property management fee, there's some delinquency, there's this, there's that, there's everything. A well-managed, in shape group of houses should return should need about 40% to pay for taxes, et cetera, delinquencies. So I'd take this number times 0.6 to look for what maybe even 0.5, but I'll take 0.6 to get what my real cash is going to be. right? So, you said you had a $75,000 number a year, and that's a little theoretical because, well, there were so many numbers that are flying around there, right? So if I think I'm going to get 60% of the payments as really in my pocket after reserves and all that, then I get down to a negative yield, right? So that's all that does, is that tells me there's things I don't know, right? Am I planning that the property is too expensive to manage because these aren't rentals, these are owner occupant or investor managed properties, right? And then you start chipping away at that, right? And so I go back to my 15% yield. I'm back to my $8,300 payment. What's the, like you said, you started chipping off things off of this. What's the, what's it, what should it really be? Well, let's take, if it's a rental, you've got a much longer you got a much longer number of months that you're working from. But it's still, we're still looking at some kind of reasonable number. So let's take one of these notes where you're 15.5, right? What's the rent? What's the average rent or the average note payment? Pick one, if I didn't want to buy 30, I wanted to buy one. Where'd you go, Dion? Dion, I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we're back.
All right. So I was yelling at you. No, I was probably blowing my speaker out.
Yeah.
All right. So wait. So let's clear some things up, right? Some of that's some bad math. So in a contract for deed, what we have is we have a borrower purchase the property for X at interest rate, let's just say 9% over a term of 10 years. Taxes and insurance are pass-throughs. So you wouldn't pull those out of investor expenses because they're pass-throughs, right? So those should be being covered, right? So this is a little bit more like a triple net lease in that sense.
Yeah.
Right. So in this particular pool, I'm gonna deal with the pool level because that's the math I'm staring at. From a pool level, we have a principal and interest payment of $7,854 per month, which comes to $94,248 per month. We can set aside, because of the pass-through, we can set aside taxes and insurance. There's caveats to that. Taxes are taxes, straightforward. Insurance, who does it cover? Different story. So, but P&I is P&I here passing through to the investor. So that looks like your rent payment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your manager like us, we step in and take 10% of that collection, then we add your warranty on every single year. You're going to end up with an investor cash flow of $71,000, right? You're not paying for improvements. You don't need to hold back for reserves because the contract purchaser is required to do that.
Right.
So you're at 5,900. You should be at you should be coming to 70. You should be coming to 71 on 407 is really what you should be coming to. Should be 71,363 on $407,000 of a purchase price fundamentally.
Okay. Right, 71,000. Okay, so where I was going is, if I'm holding a rental, like you just said, I'm responsible for taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, all that.
Yeah,
right?
these aren't. This isn't a rental.
Right.
This is a contract for deed.
So here I am. If I'm building my, I'm in the building my business mode, and I'm stacking up rentals. And at some point, you decide that you don't want to self-manage or have a bunch of these managed in whatever way. You then sell them to another investor, or you sell them to the owner occupant. Almost most of what I've done is sell it to the owner occupant. And when I do that, I have to figure out, so I'll usually move them in for a year paying rent. And then that takes care of the credit report part. Are they qualified? Yes, they could make their rent payment. And then I figure the contract for deed based on that number. I don't say, if they were paying 900 a month in rent, I don't say, hey, the note payment is 900 and now you've got $400 in taxes and insurance to handle. We come to a number that makes sense. The number that I try to do, that I was taught, was if I'm selling a small house to somebody, I want their total monthly payment to be about the same as a 2-bedroom apartment in that area, so that they're getting a better deal. They're getting a whole house and a backyard for the price of an apartment, right? So these have a note payment. These have a monthly payment. You're getting for a Section 8, maybe they're getting $650. Would that be right? Oh, he's gone away again. What are you doing?
No, I'm here. I'm here. The average payment in this portfolio for PITI is $367.82.
Okay, so there we are. So you've got a sub $400 payment, and me, the landlord focused guy, is like, why would I take that when I'm getting $700 a month now? Well, it's because I'm amortizing the asset. I'm getting to take some money and put it in another deal. I'm all kinds of things. I can sell it. It's easier sometimes to sell the note.
Well, the caveat to that is there's fundamentally about $100 and some odd, call it $120 difference between principal and interest taxes and insurance.
Yeah.
Right. And so tax and insurance are a pass through.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that happens in the contract for deed is you're passing off improvements to the purchaser in contract. Mm-hmm. So your CapEx. So do you need to be worried about CapEx? Yes. Do you need to set aside the same amount of reserves as if you were a landlord? No.
Right.
Right. In an ideal world, it's a contract for deed. That's what they're there for. Yep. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do that, when we calculate what the investor earns, right? The investor earns in the portfolio, the investor earns $7,854 a month in principal and interest.
That's right.
Right.
So right.
Annualized, annualized, it's just shy of $95,000. We'll round up for easy math. Mm-hmm. Right.
So here we are with this group of accounts, all represented in my little calculator as one purchase, one apartment building,
yep.
31, 620,000. You're going to gross $7,800 a month. 4 years later, you want to sell the portfolio, and the value that day is $435,000. That's about where we are now, right? So we're somewhere about that now.
No, you'd be less. You'd be, because balance is less. I don't know. Yeah, balance is closer to 410.
Okay, so I'll pull. Let me get rid of that. So I'm going to come back and say, is this a deal? And try to then ask for folks to. We've thrown an awful lot of information like we usually.
I know people are getting confused by the math.
Yeah, so we've got 75 months left to go in this.
Let me do this.
Yeah.
Let me share a screen.
Okay, go.
You see that?
Yep, now you're open.
Okay. So you got every asset in the pool. So what we did was price out cost of due diligence, price out quiet title, price out inspections, price out home warranty, price out future conveyance, price out quiet title, and price out, I already said it, our due diligence was BPO, title. So this would get you into a purchase. There's still some, varying costs to close. So if you look at the schedule on the right? So fundamentally, you've got an unpaid balance at the state of the pool right for this cutoff date, which this dates back to May. You got a $492,000 unpaid balance. We discounted it 17%, so it's just shy of that 15. The ask is 50. The ask is a 15% discount. We're 2 points ahead of that. Purchase price would be $407. You'd have a principal and interest payment passing through to you. It's $7,854 a month. You'd have $95,000 annually. You'd have a 10% management fee. Your annual renewal for that warranty to mitigate your CapEx would be $13,460 because that's a static cost. Investor cash would then be $71,363. That cash on cash return 17.53%.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So some of that is what happens if we did due diligence through purchasing the whole portfolio. So that will vary on a per asset basis between 15 and 17%, because the rate of return for each individual asset isn't exactly the same. Obviously, when we group the portfolio together, we're going to get a scale of economy, and it's gonna gross up a little bit. The other thing that obviously that doesn't take into consideration is are you going to pay $1,200 for every single asset? No, there's going to be some assets because they're already at 5 years vintage that are 2 more years. They're not going to pay in full, so you don't have to do a quiet title, so you didn't spend $1,200, right? So does the seller discount it to 82, or what do I got? 82, call it 83, or does he give you the 85? So newer vintage stuff, you would expect the seller to say, hey, 85.
Okay, too much detail. Too much detail.
All right,
back up. Okay, all right. So simply, it's a way to structure a group of quasi rental.
Oh, we're doing it. I'll show you this. I'll show you the specs on the pool.
Okay,
so people can pause.
I have to apologize, everybody. You can't stop him once he gets the spreadsheet open.
But you can see, so we stratified the pool, right? So this is the pool, right? So we got East Chicago, we got some zip code breakouts, we got property types, entities, not really much there. There's your bed count. We grouped up square footage. So you can see we got, you can see where gross clusters are. Down payments in most of these contracts aren't significant. These are weak contract for deeds. I'll be the first to admit they're not strong contract. If Steve or I were to be the originators of these, they wouldn't look like this. Mm-hmm. And so then we take the original loan balance. We've got one asset that's in there for 7%, which brings the whole weighted average down. We've got that's the real missed payment. A lot of guys are ahead. This is a very good performing pool. And then we got some vintage, right? So this is a good cash flowing pool. When you couple that with the mitigation that we put in place, that return becomes a fairly reliable return on a portfolio basis. This is portfolio math, right? And it's not an IRR. This is an easy math calculation. If we were to do an IRR on an individual asset basis, you'd see a 15 to 17% return held to maturity. You'd see higher returns if paid in full happened prior to maturity. Right. Because you're going to experience a discount subject to some of the things that you may or may not pay. You may not have to pay this $1,200. In a $1,500 asset, that's a significant amount of money. That's going to move the needle on your return, right? And what what I would tell you is if somebody picked the whole pool up, that $1,200 on a pool basis probably drops to $900, $800. I'll probably get one of our attorneys to do it for $900, right? Mm-hmm. So we were being conservative and just doing down and dirty math in that sense.
And you did the same thing with me, 5 years ago when we bought those 30 mortgages. You planned for everything.
Yes.
You planned for
everything.
We
take a very conservative approach, saying you're gonna pay for everything. Yeah. Everything's gonna go wrong, you're gonna pay for it.
And again, the value for everybody when you're talking to investors, when you're trying to figure out what's right for you, is it was so much easier. It is always so much easier for me to put money away at the beginning than to have to come back and ask. And so I had $1,800 reserved for every mortgage that I bought to cover all the data, all the things that needed to get done. So I never had to go dip into my pocket again.
One of the things I'll tell you here, right? So you've got a collateral value from an automated value model of 1.6 million. We've got an unpaid balance of
490.
Yeah, I think we're at 35%, something like that.
Yeah. Right? So that's another thing is, this is when people talk about tough neighborhoods, then people get scared because they're thinking of market collapses, they're thinking of all kinds of things, and tough markets don't boom and bust like the coasts. So will these valuations go up and down? Sure, they will. But the cash flow will stay the same. These people have been in possession past the typical default period. Typically, defaults are inside of the first year and a half.
This is the one in sale right now. So it came back at 201. I said 205. I'm sorry, I misquoted myself. 201, 3-unit, no interior inspection. So it's not right. That number is not right because there was no interior inspection. I walked through the interior. Basement and upper floor are inhabitable. So it's not a $201,000. It's a $201,000 if both of those units are inhabitable. But that particular borrower, this is the borrower in yellow, that particular borrower has a balance of $55,000. So you're at 85% of that $55,000. She bought it for $65,000. She's got room to improve that property. So she's got $120,000 if she can improve that property and still be okay. Mm-hmm. And that's where we step in and say, hey, don't burn all your equity by paying cousin Vinny to do your plumbing. Do this, pay the right guys to do it right, have it done, and you'll still end up with a $200,000 property. And by the way, somewhere along the way, before your term is up, you could probably refinance conventional. And that particular borrower was both a W-2 wage earner and a independent contractor, making great money. She works for a trucking company, makes good money. The whole family lives there. So, do we think she can make her $800 payment? $971. She's actually ahead. As we close that loan up, as we close that transaction up, she has a surplus of payment walking into October, right? Is she managing her improvements well? No. And I'll even show you, this will be interesting. So through our
all right. Then we're gonna close up because it's past my
I know. It's case study. Come on. Work with me. You got me here. You said once I get here. So she wrote us, through our interview, I said, what are you doing? Here's the list of everything she's doing, each level, yada, 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 right? She gave us a little map, and this is by my direction to her. And so, we go through and say, hey, we're going to help you work this budget back up to make sure that you do not expend the equity that you should have in the future value. But what we want for the investor here is, are you secured through the as-is value? In this particular asset, I think you're well secured. Was it purchased at the right number at 65? Yeah. And I would venture to say that through, the automated value model that we have, and even through inspection. If we've got a future value of 200,000, she bought it for 65, she's paid down fundamentally $10,000, plus you're getting a 15% discount, you're sitting pretty safe. You're making a 17% return. She's got money to advance. If you were to take that property back, you'd have an opportunity to sell it back at 65. Plus, she's done some beautiful improvements in the floor that she lives in already. So she's already got capital into it. And so these are the things. I think the point of my demonstration was, if there's a way to manage contract for deeds better, this is it. If you're going to buy a contract for deed, so I probably could pose this argument. A lot of people take their contract for deeds and they put them with a mortgage servicer. The problem with a mortgage servicer with a contract for deed is they don't enforce what is the opportunity in a contract for deed, which is the investor ownership rights. As an investor, and me being your property manager, I can walk into that property. I have every right to walk into that property on your behalf, and I have every right to make sure that things are improved properly and permitted properly. And that means that through any default, if it's being managed properly, there's a little bit of equity enjoyment that you get to receive if they default and you take the property back. And then bear in mind that, in the state of Indiana, a purchaser in a contract, when they pay down 20% of their principal, they earn a right of redemption, which means they get a foreclosure. But you'd still have an improved property. If her improvements were 20 grand, you earn 20 grand, and it's not your money.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. Like I said, let's now we've bored people to sleep, and we've covered, as usual.
This is why Steve doesn't invite me very much.
well, yeah, we know I talk nonstop. Between the two of us, it's ridiculous. So we talked about 1,000 different things.
I was only supposed to have 4 slides.
Right. That's right. Yeah, 2 of them are supposed to be your name. The floor is open. Any kind of questions, anything you want us to repeat? How does this apply to you? What can, since we're hanging out, what can we do to help?
Yeah.
So raise your hand, unmute, jump in, say hi.
So if I'm getting this straight, because this is the first time I've ever come across this particular asset class, or at least way of buying in, you're coming in to help with the seller who's about to default on their mortgage, and they're doing this contract to deed to help them stay where they are?
No.
Okay.
These were properties that were bought at wholesale, rehabbed, and then either a renter was put in or they were sold on a land contract, which is a way the South and the Midwest trades houses that don't qualify for FHA mortgages. These are low value homes that the federal government doesn't insure. So they are sold to people who don't have strong credit in tough parts of town. And what it does for the world, what I like them is you're providing somebody an opportunity to actually earn some equity. Maybe the home is only worth $50,000, but still, that's the only $50,000 this person has ever saved. So there's, those of us that live on the coasts where prices are $1 million, we don't understand this until you've been there, look at it, and go, oh, this is how it works. So these people there are some of them that are local investors that own a couple, 3, 4 houses like this, and then they rent them out, often to Section 8 tenants. And then there's those that are sold direct to the homeowner. and they're at a coupon, they're at a 9% interest rate, which is not market today for a mortgage. But again, the house doesn't qualify, the homeowner doesn't qualify. But the government, but after you've made a number of payments, the house value increases a little. I've had refinances happen on my notes where they went out and borrowed more money, and it was great, so. So here's an example. It's a 1910s, 20s, 30s house. 1910. This is what the middle of our country is full of. This is the Rust Belt. But this still is providing a home, and a regular bank won't do this, which creates the opportunity for us to be the bank. And so.
Thanks. I think you may have mentioned this, but there's a balloon payment at some point, usually after like 5 years or so. How is that?
No balloons.
Structured?
These are fully amortized loans.
Okay.
The typical form for this for generations has been what's called a 10-10-10. 10% down, 10% interest, 10 years to pay. So that was what a mortgage used to be before banks invented 30-year mortgages. Nice brick house. I like brick houses. And so Gary deservedly had a terrible rap for a long time. 2/3 of the population of Gary moved out when the steel industry went to China. And what was left was people that were out of work, and that means lots of crime. It has had not quite a renaissance, but it has had a significant stabilization. Crime rates have come way down. And the city in the last crisis, they got money from what was called the hardest hits funds, and they spent it on bulldozers. And they cleared block after block of blight and just got it out. So Gary used to be a city. It's now a group of suburbs. It's just because the houses are, like every fifth house isn't there anymore. So here, 1,100 square feet, built in 1955. This is my thing. This is me. I don't mind 1950s houses. So.
There's irony in that street name.
Yes, there is. Dion and I are fighting through rehab that's just gotten way too long, as they do sometimes. But we're still friends, But so there you are. That's that's an old shotgun style house from the 20s probably. And this is 1924. This is a duplex, right? Or is this the triplex that you were working on?
That currently is a single family.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, at one point it was two. At one point
Yeah.
it was two. Yeah.
And you see that, right? So, as Steve alluded to, at the height of Gary's population had 100 and, call it 180,000. Now we got like 72,000. So we're missing, 100,000 plus people. But, what you see in these blighted communities is you see investors taking opportunities to pick up stuff from tax sales and reconvey those things. And I call it the race to the bottom, right? Investors buy something for cheap, put the least amount of money in it, and then, put a renter in it, or try to make a couple bucks and sell it off and pass that, liability down to the borrower.
Okay. Let's see if we have some more comment.
Okay.
So
Anybody else?
that, so those of you that are new to this idea, there's lots of good research you can find. There, this level of house and note and all that is trades in our world. The giant hedge funds aren't buying this stuff; they're buying the $200,000 plus houses. So this is the world where we can work. I'm on a I don't know. Sometimes I'm on a mission, but it's always something that's on my mind. Is I really like the idea that I make an okay living providing providing affordable housing for people and giving people a better deal than they had before. And and that's every time I get a payoff, it kind of amazes me. There's somebody out there that paid off a house. How many people living on the coasts ever pay off their house, right? Imagine if you paid off your house in 10 years. What would happen to your cash flow? So
Yeah, and again, if I use the case sample from this portfolio for that borrower, I'd tell you she hit a home run.
Yeah,
she picked up a property for $65,000 without exposing her credit by buying it seller financed, right? So she's not exposed. This is private credit. She got it in an affordable payment for herself, where she is capable of capitalizing improvements, and she's got a 3 unit, for $65,000 that at from a street view is worth 200. Not knowing what the inside looks like. The inside needs improvements, but so she's got a lot of she's got $100,000 that she could put into that, and I don't think her improvements are $100,000. I think her improvements are 50. Right? She's got some money to spend. Her intention is not to turn it into a multi-unit. Her intention is to turn it into a 3-4 family living area. Multi-generational 3-floor family unit for her and her her mom and dad and her brother. And that's not a bad deal for W-2 wage earner living in the Midwest, making some good money, working for a trucking company, doing what she does, and everybody, and she's got the time because of the seller financing. Even though it's 10 years, she's got the time to take her own cash flow and that of the family and dump it into the property and do the improvements over time. And we're not there to accelerate improvements. We're there to make sure improvements take place properly. That's it. So don't spend, unfortunately, again, there's a lot of DIY out there, especially when the real estate market's hot, right? You're going to do some DIY stuff. I think a lot of investors do that. Don't do that, man. I'll give you 100,000 examples of how that'll bite you.
Unless it's your business.
Right. Yeah.
And so we should, what's the lesson I've learned is, everything that turns out well are things that I really focus on. And when I'm, a weekend warrior, it never pays off. So like I said, we're running up on time and really trying to do a better job of this. I'm glad to see a couple new folks. We've been talking about not doing these anymore, again, because I just don't do them often enough. There's the last 30 of these are on YouTube under my name, Steve Hodgdon, all one word. There's a half a dozen interviews with Dion, a couple of years back, maybe 3 years back, talking about how to buy mortgage notes. And I know folks get on this list for that specifically. we break down a tape and go through how due diligence works. And a lot of what I talk about are ways well, the really expensive seminars that I've been to. I mean, the $100,000 seminars, because I've made mistakes and because I've tried to do things on my own. Like I said, Dion and I have got a couple other things in the fire. I've been pulled toward, again, more affordable housing and how to build those things faster, modular, SIPs builds, that kind of stuff. We're starting a 4-unit project in Pensacola. I don't know, a couple of months I may talk about that. A couple months ago, I talked about I bought 2 lots through a tax deed. Because I had never done that before. So now I know how to buy tax deed lots. A while back before that, I talked about taking property through sheriff's sale. And I'm very happy that my partner in turning those properties around is on the call. I'm looking forward to doing more with her. So I've got 4 of the people, well, if we count Zandra, because I introduced her to Daniel, 4 of the people in this room, I've already got financial relationships with. And I just realized that that's kind of cool. Thanks. So maybe we'll do this more. Any last questions before we call it a night?
Woohoo, you go, Steve.
That's Eric. Eric does woohoo all the time. So it's great. All right. Steve at modernassetmanagement.com. This will be up on YouTube tomorrow. And maybe there's some way that I can get my information up here one more time.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
And Siri's trying to talk to me. I'm not sure I like this Apple thing. Anyway, there's my email address. Oops, down here at the bottom. Always happy to chat. I can't stop myself from talking about this stuff. And again, those of you that I've been, one person here in particular, I'm going to call tomorrow because I owe them a call. And we're going to get some stuff started. So there it is. There's my email address one more time. All right. So I want to thank everybody for coming. And everybody have a lovely night. All right. All right.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Thanks everybody for showing
Okay.
up.
All right. Thanks for letting me beat up on you, Dion.
Always.
All right. Okay. All right. Good night, all. All right. Bye-bye.